and tracking the progress of some of the biggest and most world-changing humanitarian campaigns this planet has to offer. Last time, we left off in the middle of an interview with Ms. Jan Eastgate, President of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, a non-profit watchdog group devoted to the cleaning up of human rights violations and abuses in the field of mental health. Since its founding in 1969, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, or CCHR, have been responsible for enacting more than 150 laws protecting individuals from abusive or coercive practices. So now, without further ado,
we're looking at human rights, particularly the area of mental health reform. And I have a guest here today, Jan Eastgate, who is the International President of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. CCHR exposed the dangers of Ritalin, which was prescribed for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, which led in this country to the former Prime Minister John Howard asking for a Royal College of Physicians inquiry into ADHD. Can you explain, Jan, what ADHD is and what happened in that inquiry?
ADHD is a diagnosis that psychiatrists literally invented to describe unruly behaviour in children, and it is become a cash cow for psychiatry. It was added to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders in 1987. That's in America, and within a year 500,000 American children supposedly had ADHD. And if you look at the symptoms of that, it's like fidgeting, losing your pencils, climbing trees excessively, speaking out of turn. Any childhood behaviour could be redefined as ADHD. And this has become predominant in Australia as well. And here it was so excessive. In fact, Australia has the third highest consumption of Ritalin, which doctors call kiddie cocaine because it's like cocaine in the way it goes to certain receptors in the brain. And to have the third highest consumption of this drug in the world is a serious situation in the country. And consequently, there was an inquiry asked for into ADHD to develop guidelines for its treatment. As CCHR discovered, the committee members that were used to investigate this had pharmaceutical company ties. And in fact, the head of the committee was on the advisory board of Novartis, the drug company that makes Ritalin. So, of course, CCHR exposed this, and there was national media on it, and he was forced to resign. Now, subsequent to that, there's been various guidelines that have come out that have, said that Ritalin shouldn't be the first drug of choice, and that at least parents should be able to see doctors and find alternatives to being put on putting their child on a drug like Ritalin. But, those guidelines still haven't been finalised. And in fact, what we found was that when they did come out, over 50 of the studies that they were relying upon were by an American psychiatrist called Joseph Biederman. And he has been under a congressional Senate investigation for his undisclosed conflicts of interest with the pharmaceutical industry. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, there's been international media on this. And he was, in fact, the New York Times said that his diagnosing children with ADHD or bipolar disorder is another one, had quadrupled the number of children being put onto antipsychotics in the United States. And he had over $1.6 million that he'd failed to disclose to Harvard University that he'd made from drug companies. So his research was fairly suspect. And this was also raised with the Royal College of Physicians, and they withdrew the guidelines pending the outcome of that investigation. But, we're talking about, this constant situation where CCHR has to investigate any committee, whether it's the Therapeutic Goods Administration that oversees drug regulations, whether it's committees that are set up to investigate psychiatric diagnoses or the drugging of children. You inevitably find that there's a conflicts of interest, and you see that this is a serious risk because it can influence the outcomes of those inquiries, it can influence the outcomes of clinical drug trials, and that puts children at risk in this country.
Thank you very much. We're going to a short break.